Imagine a forest. How do you see it? Probably tall trees and lots of greenery. But what if what we see today is just a fake copy? Because in reality, what we consider a forest is just bushes no more than 30 centimeters high. Where do the real trees grow? Where are those giants that are talked about in fairy tales? Perhaps they once existed. Perhaps they were much larger than we can imagine. And perhaps the mountains we are used to are not mountains at all. Let's go figure it out. Look at these pictures. These giant trees are so gigantic that American sequoias look like a match and a baobab next to them. The largest giant trees, antediluvian fossil trees, look, according to skeptics, like an ordinary mountain. But if you look closely, were there giant trees on our planet in the past? We will show a theory that claims that trees could have existed in the past and were several kilometers high. We all knew old fairy tales about castles inhabited by princesses and dungeons as children. These stories were told to us in small classrooms at school, and even our parents read them to us by the light of night lights, sitting on the edge of the bed. These were stories in which the heroes were fantastic characters living in a huge environment where giants ruled. If the authors of these old fairy tales had brought morality to their stories, full of courage and chivalry, what would have become the legendary background? We know that these stories were often inspired by myths of the past, ancient Sanskrit texts, and also by the Bible, which tells us about the era when giants lived on Earth. In fairy tales, giants almost always have techno-magical treasures or secrets that they jealously guard. Let's remember the movie adaptation of Jack and the Magic Bean, where the hero made a giant tree grow thanks to a simple bean. And then, climbing this tree, Jack discovers an unknown land where a cannibal lives. This Jack is often compared to another Jack, the giant killer, who in the time of King Arthur used tricks to defeat them. Collective memory. It remains to be seen why these giants are always dangerous. According to some researchers, in fact, these myths that run through stories are rooted in collective memory, keeping the hidden history of our world. These are memories that belong to the collective unconscious, which sometimes appear in the world through people who are able to understand and transmit them in the form of fairy tales. Using parables under the pretext of children's tales, they tell us a world that was once different. Stories that begin with the words, "Once upon a time," a term, which, contrary to what it may seem, clearly establish the reality revealed in the course of the narrative. Will the forgotten history of the Earth be born in this way in the minds of some inspired authors? The famous science fiction writer Philip K. Dick speaks of recovered memories, testifying that his works of fiction were real, arising from dreams buried in his subconscious. Could the fairy tale world before ours, inhabited by giants and grandiose architecture, was destroyed to such an extent that it lost not only its memory, but also its trace, leaving nothing but the narrative epic of our legends? Some researchers have recognized this possibility. Many will be surprised to hear the hypothesis that some mountains and other great rocks of the world look like glassy places belonging to another era. Robert Charroux mentions this with some photographic themes in one of his books. Then we must weigh the following question: how could they have become petrified or glassy? Architectural gigantism researchers claim that those who built these monuments were giants. In fact, myths tell us that giant gods destroyed cities and fortresses, and that at that time they possessed numerous terrifying weapons capable of melting the rock itself. When asking some researchers about giants, one can understand that most of them will instantly accept the possibility of their existence in a distant and forgotten early history. Apart from ancient monuments related to the art of architectural gigantism, we still ignore the method of manufacturing and construction of such structures as the pyramids. Researchers of truth believe that there is other evidence that suggests that the Earth represents the work of giants as well as the Earth's environment adapted to their dimensions. There are rock formations around the Earth that geologists consider completely natural, but very specific structural aspects of which strangely remind us of very familiar forms, such as giant trees. In particular, the structure called Devil's Tower, towering over the valley of the state of Wyoming in the USA, offers all visitors and travelers a grand panorama of the already legendary Route 66. Take a closer look with an open mind. This mountain, supposedly made of volcanic rocks, is very similar to a giant petrified tree trunk. Its unusual appearance has given rise to many legends. In fact, in 1977, Devil's Tower was used in the final scene of Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Some believed that it was a fictitious work of the director for his film, like Big Thunder Mountain in Disneyland, conceived for the famous roller coaster ride, or the rock in the Parc des Buttes Chaumont in Paris, or even the large rock of the Vincennes Zoo, which is completely artificial. Devil's Tower in Wyoming really does exist, for those who still doubt it. But recently, none other than scientists from the Wyoming State Parks Department conducted photographic and seismic measurements of the park. And during this study, they discovered something very interesting. Quote, "We found something that resembles a giant petrified root system under the tower. It starts from the base of Devil's Tower. Its depth and width are 4 and 7 miles. We are currently conducting research to confirm or refute our guesses," they said. This message was published from the official account of the department in a prohibited social network. Of course, later they will say that they rushed to conclusions because otherwise they will have to admit that this is indeed a petrified giant stump. And this raises hundreds of other questions, the main one of which is, who cut it down? The fact that trees turn to stone has been known for quite a long time. In the USA, there is a whole valley consisting of ancient petrified stumps, and what is remarkable is that it is forbidden to touch them, more precisely to take them as a souvenir, otherwise a huge fine. By the way, another name for the Devil's Tower is the Tree of Life. And there are many interesting legends about this tree, including biblical ones. But the one that stands out among them is the one that says that the tree was cut down by our creators when they saw us as conquerors. According to this legend, with the help of the tree, creatures from other worlds appeared on Earth. Actually, people could travel through them using the tree. However, at some point, humanity offered the gods to enslave this force, and then they realized that we were their mistake. By cutting it down, they deprived us of the opportunity to travel to other lands. New species no longer appeared on the planet. And the worst thing is that a global catastrophe occurred, caused by a fallen trunk. Because of it, many species died. Many technologies were lost. People forgot their history. Swindlers came to power. I don't know how true this legend is, but I am absolutely sure of two things. The catastrophe really happened, and the architecture of the past could not have been created with chisels and hammers. A huge fallen tree explains these 2 points well. It could have been cut down only by having extreme technologies, inaccessible to our civilization, and a fallen multi-ton trunk could easily have caused waves that washed almost the entire world. A number of hypotheses have been put forward about this unusual geological formation. In the official scientific circle, the Devil's Tower was a laccolith, the result of magma coming out of the depths of the Earth's crust. For seekers of truth, such an explanation is hardly acceptable, for the simple reason that lava emissions never have that geophysical aspect, which we observe with the Devil's Tower. It is also true that the tower makes us imagine it as the trunk of a giant tree that had to be carefully sawed with a saw. This means that the woodcutter must have been a giant. What is amazing is the vertical grooves with regular angles, built in the form of giant columns, which seem to extend into a formation with an organized geometry, where it ends abruptly with a flat top. How can we explain that such geometric shapes can be found on a flat surface? The usual answer that science gives us is that nature uses these shapes everywhere to create these works of art. What do you think? By the way, this stump is far from the only one. There are many similar objects around the world, but if they were all trees, then why cut down each one? What do you think? But as other researchers claim, none of the giant trees were cut down. They are extracted from underground, where they have lain for thousands of years. Once in a swamp formed on the site of a once dried-up lake, trunks of giant trees were found, 7 to 9 meters in diameter. Scientific examination showed that the trees are many millennia old. Their wood turned out to be fresh. What kind of trees were they, and what was their fate? And it really lay in the ground for many thousands of years, until it was dug up at the site of the dried-up Quarry Lake in New Zealand. What kind of tree is this? And what is the strange, if not mysterious, story associated with it? As scientists say, many thousands of years ago, giant trees were felled by a powerful hurricane or earthquake and buried at the bottom of a deep lake. The years passed, centuries turned into millennia, and the mighty giants still rested underwater. The lake had time to turn into a swamp, and the trees were preserved in it for many centuries. Landscapes changed, climate. So 50,000 years passed. The uniqueness of the trees that were found by people at their age. This is the oldest wood in the world. At the same time, the tree did not lose its properties. There was no petrification or decomposition. The wood turned out to be fresh. The University of New Zealand has put forward several theories as to why this happened, but none of the theories have been proven definitively. Today, giant prehistoric trunks are exported from New Zealand to Italy, where factories, with the participation of the world's most famous architects, produce art objects from them. Designers can afford to go wild, because the trunks of giant trees reach 9 meters in diameter and 70 meters in length. The most expensive table in the world, by the way, was created from a single slab of fossil wood. Its cost is 1,890,000 euros. Many found fossil trees have a flint structure. This raises the question, could there have been flint life on our planet in the past? It turns out that it very well could. In some places, there are so many trees that it cannot be called anything other than a forest. The structure of the wood of stone trees is clearly visible. There are fossilized stone bones of animals, including precious stones. The bone structure is preserved in the fines. The opal jaw of the animal has structured teeth, tooth sockets. Many mountains resemble stumps of huge stone trees. In the steppes, stone shells, ammonites, are scattered in large quantities. In general, there are many examples of fossil silicon creatures. Let's assume for ourselves that silicon life is a fact, and it preceded carbon life on our planet. Let's go further. Something happens and silicon life dies. Carbon life now thrives on its ruins. A natural question: where are the bodies of dead silicon animals, plants, fish, etc.? Stump mountains and stone trees have already been mentioned. Suitable, but not enough quantity and variety. I would like to see a complex life form consisting of different organs and tissues. For example, like an animal, with skin, with muscles, with a liver, with blood vessels, and a heart. Well, maybe it was, but what it looked like, we have yet to find out. But if such an era existed, then when did it end? The silicon era is the Earth's crust. The Earth's crust is made up of rocks, the main element of which is silicon. The crust is 5 to 30 kilometers thick, and silicon creatures developed these kilometers with their life activity. Just as carbon creatures develop fertile soil now, so far they have developed 3 meters. Nature synthesizes a bunch of precious and semi-precious stones based on silicon. This is what silicon life did. Highly organized silicon creatures consisted of highly organized silicon in the form of precious stones. And common sand, granite, and clay are building materials, the basis of life. After the end of the silicon world, precious and semi-precious raw materials, that is, the corpses of highly organized silicon creatures, were barbarously plundered. Unneeded sand, granite, and clay remained. What an interesting theory, friends. Well, we will say goodbye to you.